So we're on Shelach. Shelach means to send on page 798. We're going to get into a few weeks of parshas that deal with stories. Maybe for a number of weeks now we've been doing, building the temple and the Mishkan, all the parts of it, counting the people, inaugurating the temple. But now we're going to get into a little bit of a story with other things. But this is a very significant story. And it's known as the story of the spies, or in Hebrew, the Meraglim. So it says, "Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Lemor," as we begin most. Well, I remember I always say we always begin with this, and when we don't, then there's something to talk about. So this is what it begins with. And then it says, "Shlach lecha anashim." God says to Moshe, "You should send men, vayasuru es aretz, and they should tour or spy on the land of Canaan, asher ani nosein livnei Israel, that I'm giving to the Jewish people." Ish echad l'matei avosav. One person from each of the tribes. Tishlechu, you should send kol nasi v'hem. The prince should be sent. The head of the tribe should be sent. So the background story here is that the Jewish people have been told they're going to get the land of Israel. They came out of Egypt. They went to get the Torah. Now they're going to go to the land of Israel immediately. There is no 40 years that we know of. They're going to Israel right now. And this story is the pivotal story why they don't get there so fast. And they decide that they're afraid. We're going to go to Israel, but there's people living in Israel. Maybe they're stronger than us. Maybe they'll kill us. Maybe they'll push us off. Maybe we're not, because God says we should go and take the land. Maybe they're not going to let us take the land so fast. So they go to Moshe and they say, look, it's a military tactic. We got to send spies, find out what we're up against. So this, in and of itself, both Moshe and God were not happy with. Because if God says, I'm going to give you the land, it really doesn't matter who's in the land and what they're doing, you're going to get it. God has the power to make you win a war or not even have a war. He can make it that you can have the land. He just can do it. So why are you questioning his ability? Here the Jewish people are not used to being extraordinary or super in this way, that they have the ability, that if Hashem says something, he'll do it. Yeah, miracle. Right? They presume any other nation is going to conquer land. You have to have a military plan. So they wanted to make a military plan. So God says finally the idea that God leads people in the way they want to go. God has a right way to do things, and then there's our way to do things. It's not necessarily the same. Sometimes if we really want to do something, Hashem will lead us in the way that we wanted to go, what we want to do, even if it's not necessarily the best. Here, he did not want them to send spies because they should have faith in him. He says, I'm going to give you the land, you're going to get the land. You are questioning it? All right, so send spies. Go ahead. You can be like any other nation in the world and send spies. And these are who you should send. You should send 12 spies. They should be, it uses the word here, anashim. Anashim means men, males, but it doesn't really mean male, or it means more so like leaders, sophisticated leaders, people who are respectable, known people. Like, if you're going to send spies, normally you would send someone nobody knows, right? Just a guy who's a spy. Here, I want you to send the head of every tribe. I want you to send people who are without question honorable, caring, thinking, intelligent, observant people. That's what I want you to send, right? So, one from each tribe. So V'yishlach Osam Moshe. So Moshe is prepared to send them from the desert of Paran on the word of God. Kulam anashim. They were all men, meaning not males, but men of the stature. Right? They would be like saying they were all gentlemen rather than men. Roshei b'nei Yisrael Hema. They were the heads of the tribes. Ve'elish Mosam. And then it goes through all their names. It tells you the names of each one. There are two very significant names that are here. One of them is very important for us just to take a minute on. And that is the fifth one, which is Yoshua bin Nun. It starts in line Zion, or line 7. It says, you don't have to read it necessarily, it says, Lamate, where is it? Yeshua bin Nun, I just saw it. I looked away. Oh, here it is. It says, Lamate Ephraim, Hoshea bin Nun. That's what it says. So the leader of the tribe of Ephraim was a person named Hoshea, who was the son of Nun. So we have now two problems with this. We know his name is Yoshua. Joshua, right? He's the next leader of the Jewish people. That's not known yet. We know it because we read the book, right? But we've seen the movie already. Yeah. But at this point, his name is not Yeshua. His name is Hoshea, and it says he's the son of Nun. We don't know who Nun is, and it's not much of a name. It's a letter, right? Nun, and it doesn't say Ben. It says Bin. Right? Ben means son. Bin. Maybe it's a root word of understanding, knowledge, which is called Bina, but we're not really sure. So there's a famous midrash based on the fact that we look further down, looking in verse 16, 17, it tells us that these are the names of the men whom Moshe sent to spy out the land. Moshe called Hoshea the son of Nun Yehoshua. Moshe changes his name from Hoshea to Yehoshua. And it says, Rashi tells us the reason he changed his name is so that Hoshea is to praise, but Yehoshua means to be saved. The person who was saved. I'm looking to be saved. I want a Yeshua. That's what we say. Like, I'm in a difficult situation. I need a Yeshua. You need a cure for a sickness. You need a saving from a dangerous situation. So that's what his name. He changed his name. He added a yud to the beginning of his name. There's now, and that wasn't there before. So the Midrash says that he gave it to him, as Rashi comments, in order so that he should be saved from the influence of the spies. Moshe already realized that the fact that these spies are going into Israel, they're already going in with a negative feeling. Otherwise, you wouldn't send them at all. Like, God says, I'm giving the land. You're already questioning God, so already this is not going to go well. There's going to be a problem. Moshe sees already. You're starting already. This whole thing is starting by you not believing that God's going to help you after all He's done for you in the last few months. You don't believe it. So we're going to have a problem. So Yoshua and another one of them named Kalev are two that Moshe knew would not be influenced, but it would not be easy. Right? There would be one or two people among a tribe of 12 people who are all great leaders. It's not easy to not be influenced. So therefore, Moshe gave him a blessing that his name should be changed from Hoshea to Yoshua, meaning the one who was saved, so that he would be able to stand up to the rest of the spies. Kalev was another one of them. He wasn't given that special blessing, which means he didn't need it, and he also was one of the spies who was saved from that, and it was only him and Yoshua who came back with positive reports, as we'll see when it goes on. Well, you can also now, we see this, we can understand what bin nun means. So bin, right, should be Ben. In a simple translation, his name was Hoshea the son of Nun. But we understand that the fact that they made the vowels different ties it into the word bina. Bina meaning a spiritual level of intellectual ability. And there is 50 levels of this. Nun is the number 50 in Hebrew. And therefore, it says that for some reason it's telling us Yeshua has something to do with a person of 50 levels. And that is Moshe. Moshe is the only human being in the history of the world who has achieved reaching this spiritual level of 50. So we understand from this that you've heard the line before, that a student is like a son or a daughter to the teacher. This is a Jewish concept, right? That a teacher sort of adopts the child. Not physically, but there's a relationship that is very intense. Lots of times a student who is close to a teacher may tell that teacher things that they won't tell their parents about themselves. They might seek guidance. They have a special relationship. Moshe and Yoshua had that relationship. And it says that when you have that relationship, you're like their father. You're the spiritual father. So therefore, it's telling us Yoshua his spiritual father was Moshe, because he was bin, it means the knowledge, 50. There's only one person that way. That was a hint to the fact of this concept, and that's why Moshe singled him out. And he received this. It says that where did the Medrash also asks another place a question? If Moshe added the letter Yud to his name, he had to get it from somewhere. It's a funny concept, but the Medrash does this a lot. You see that names are changed. You have Abraham as Abraham. Instead of Avram, it's Avraham. Sarah's name was Sarai, it becomes Sarah. You have Yaakov is Yisrael. Right? You see names change in the Torah, purposely for specific reasons. So when a name changes, there's a concept that the change has to come from somewhere. When Avram had the Hey put in his name, from Avram to Avraham, that Hey had to come from something. So it says here that when they added the Yud to Yeshua's name, where did that Yud come from? It came from Sarah, because Sarah's name was Sari. That was her name in the Torah. My princess, that was her name. It changed to Sarah, which means the princess, when she became the princess of the world, together with her husband Abraham. So it changed. So that letter Yud, so to speak, is flying around the world. Right? And Moshe grabs that letter Yud in a mystical sense and gives it to Yeshua. So not only does it tell us that Yeshua needed a blessing to be saved, but there was some special relationship between Sarah and Yeshua. Now because you see that it was the Yud from her name that Moshe gives him. So the Medrash is trying to teach us a lesson here. What was the character trait of Sarah? So we see that Sarah is an example of really most of our female role models. All of our female role models that I've ever come across anywhere in the literature are very different than the way the world likes to portray them. The world likes to portray women in the religious world as docile, listening to their husbands, standing in the back, not expressing an opinion, being relatively not intelligent, not being very well educated. That's how the world looks at religious women in traditional religions. And in some religions it was true. I think I spoke before about how in the Middle Ages, the royalty, the women were illiterate. They didn't know how to read and write. This is royalty. And they used to hire Jewish women to come and write their letters for them. And the Jewish women would be writing letters on behalf of the queen of, let's say, Sweden, to the queen of France. But it would really be a letter from one Jewish woman to another Jewish woman, because the Jewish woman would write what the queen wanted, and then she'd put in little messages for her friend as well, and send it off to France. Then her friend would get the letter, and she'd go read the messages, and then she'd go into the queen and read her the letter. Right? They were illiterate. Jewish women were never illiterate, and Jewish women never listened to their husbands. It was not the case. And in the case of Sarah, where she doesn't listen to Abraham, God tells Abraham, you listen to the word of your wife, she is right. Meaning always right, not just now. You should listen to your wife. But this is Abraham, probably one of the greatest Jews of history, one of the greatest people of history. God himself says, listen to her. He said, listen to her voice. Listen to what she says. So you see that Sarah did not simply do whatever Abraham wanted. She had her own opinion, and she stood up for her opinion. And what was her opinion? She wanted Yishmael thrown out of the house. Yishmael, she said, was dangerous to have in the house, even though it was a relation, but he was hurting the other children, and he was a problem, so she wanted him thrown out. Abraham was a very merciful person, did not want to throw him out. And God tells him, listen to your wife. She knows, she's right. She is correct. She's a greater prophet. Sarah was a greater prophet than Abraham. And this is very common in Jewish history. And in fact, I don't know of a single case of a Jewish woman in any of our literature that listened and was quiet and did whatever her husband said. I don't know of one case of this. And therefore, when we hear people say this, it's just total foolishness. It's coming from some other religion. It's certainly not coming from ours. So if Sarah was like that to the extent that God tells Abraham, listen to your wife, what was happening was that his wife was standing up to him. Sarah was saying, you get rid of him or else. You can't do this. You're wrong. And Abraham's saying, but he's my child. I love him. How do I send a child and his mother out into the desert? You have to do it. It's for the greater good. And God says she's right. The ability of her to stand up to Abraham, right, and to be correct to the point that God intervenes and says, listen to her, and she's a greater prophet than you are. And we have this with all of them. He's basically, that is the attribute that Moshe gave to Yeshua. The ability of Yeshua to stand up to the other men who are on this mission, who are going to come back with negative things about Israel. And Yeshua has to not allow himself to be pushed around, and he has to stand up to them. So therefore, the letter Yud from Sarah's name, Moshe took and gave to Yeshua so that he should have the strength of personality that Sarah had. He should inherit it because he's a relation, right? We all come from Sarah. So Yoshua also came from Sarah. He was a relation. So it's not impossible to inherit, right, her traits or her genes. Right? So he said that's the case. That's why we have that there. So the story basically goes on. If you look at this at the bottom of the page, that Moshe sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and he says, go in the south, climb the mountains, see the land, how is it? The people that live there, are they strong, are they weak, are they few, are they numerous? How is the land? Is it good, is it bad? How are the cities? Are they open? Do they have walls around them? And how is the land? Is it fertile or is it lean? Are there trees? Right, are you going to get fruit that you can eat so you can live while you're spying? And this was the time of year when grapes were starting to grow. So then it says how they went up and they went into the land, and it basically talks. And here's, you may have seen this. What they describe here is today is used as the symbol of the ministry of tourism in Israel. You ever see the picture of the two men, one walking behind the other? They're holding two poles, and in between them is a large bunch of grapes, like a bunch of grapes that look like each grape the size of a watermelon. So that's what we have here. If you look in here. Verse 23 on page 801, they arrived at the valley of Eshcol. They cut from there a vine with one cluster of grapes and bore it on a double pole, and of the pomegranates and of the figs. So they basically came into Israel and they saw like this is a very fertile land. This is a land where it's not like anywhere else. Things are growing very well. So they wanted to bring that back. So they cut it. So that's what that was. That's all it tells you about what they actually saw there at this point. In other words, the fact that they went and what they saw objectively plays very little reality in this story, because they are going to come back and tell us what they saw subjectively. That is, objectively is the reality, what they actually saw. Subjectively is how they explain it. And they're going to explain it in a very negative way. They're basically going to say that we're not going to be successful. We go into Israel, we're going to get killed. They're going to beat us. Right? Which is, for people who have God on their side, is a total denial of God. If God says you're going to go into the land and you're going to be fine, and they say we're going to the land, they're going to kill us, that means I'm denying God, right? That God can do it. So that's why it's such a serious thing. So it goes on. They returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days. They went and they came to Moshe, to Aaron, and to all the Jewish people, and they brought back the report to them and the entire assembly, and they showed them the fruit of the land. Now, and this is what they reported. We arrived at the land to which you sent us, and indeed it flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. And they showed the grapes. But the people that dwell in the land are powerful. The cities are very fortified. And we also saw that the offspring of the giant, right? They're enormous people. They're like physically, like going to war with, like it was Stallone or somewhere, Schwarzenegger. Amalek dwells in the area to the south. The Hittite, the Jebusite, and the Amorite dwell on the mountain. The Canaanite dwells by the sea on the bank of the Jordan. Right? So they've already come back, and that's it. We're going to lose. These people are all over the place. They're so strong. They come from giants. They're going to destroy us. So Kalev, who was one of the 12 spies, who was the other one who Moshe knew would come back with the right response, silenced the people towards Moshe, and he said, we shall surely ascend and conquer it. He says, don't listen to them. God says we're going to get it, we're going to go up and we're going to conquer it. But we can surely do it. We will definitely do it. Right? He says, don't listen to what they're saying. God says we're going to conquer it, we're going to conquer it. But the men who had ascended with him said, now the other ones start up, we can't ascend to that people, for it's too strong for us. They brought forth the children of Israel an evil report on the land. They're saying, the land through which we have passed to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. So what does that mean? So it says the following, that God wanted to make it that the spies would go and they would have a positive experience. They would see that they could come back and they're going to be successful. However, God can't and won't change the mind of a person. We have free will. He wants us to be able to make our own decisions. So he made the situation that the only way you will see negative is if you want to. So here's what he does. He sends in these people who are strangers, right? They come from the Jews. They're going into a land of Canaan. The people in Canaan don't know who they are. They're different. So they might get caught. So God did a bunch of things to cause that they wouldn't notice. One thing that he did is he caused that a lot of people who were ill, older people, died. They died right then. of the Canaanites, so that every day people were going to funerals. Every day. There was funeral after funeral after funeral. So if people are involved with funerals all the time, they might not notice a stranger in the area. So God did it on purpose so that the spies would not be noticed when they came into the area. Right? It was a miracle that he did on their behalf. But when they came in with a pessimistic view, they said, everywhere we look, everyone's going to funerals. Everyone's dying in this country. The land itself devours the people. The land kills people. There's so many people dying. How do you expect us to live here? It's a terrible place to live. Everyone's dying. But in reality, you think it through. First thing, let's not say that they didn't know that God did this. But human nature is that if a person, if God forbid it should happen that somebody we're acquainted with dies, so we feel bad and we go to the funeral, we go to the Shiva, right? But if you're living in a place where there's a plague, and 10 people that you know, God forbid, in a day die, and this goes on day after day after day after day, right, for 40 days. Come the 10th, 11th day of 4 or 5 funerals a day, are you going to still go to all these funerals? Probably not. You're probably, what are you going to do? Give up your life? Go to 4 funerals a day every day for 40 days? You don't even know 40 days. It could be forever. But people just stop going. It's not going to happen. They'll go to the first few, then they'll go a little less and a little less. You can't give up everything, right? But here the spies went in and they saw everyone is going to funerals. So if they were having funerals all the time because the land devours the people, people wouldn't go to funerals. But they saw everyone going. So they had to have a negative frame of mind, not to see the fact that this is not normal. This is happening because of us. We're here, that God did this to make it so that we don't get caught. Instead, they thought the land is terrible, everyone dies. They didn't think people, the average person is not going to go to 4 funerals a day for their whole life. They'll have no life, right? So they didn't understand that, right? Because the spies came in already with the intention to say we're not going to make it. That was their intention. We'll discuss why, but that's what they did, right? So then it says, all of the people that we saw in it were huge. There we saw the Nephilim. So they saw big people, okay, the Nephilim. The Nephilim, there's questions as to what that really is, but we have the word earlier in the Torah, and we seem to think that it means that there was a certain race of people who were like superhuman. Not that they could fly or shoot bullets at them, but that they were like amazingly fit, amazingly large. They were much stronger and healthier than the average person. That you could say it was their genetics, you could say many reasons, but they were extraordinary. And the first time that the Jews saw them was when they came into Canaan. And how are we going to go to war with these guys? It's like, you can't beat them. Like, a human being can maybe bench press 250 pounds. These guys can do 700 pounds. So these guys were like superhuman. How can you do that? So they say, we were like
Can you take mine too, please?
We were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we were in their eyes. Now, this is a very telling statement. They say these guys were so big and powerful, so strong, like we're like grasshoppers. Like we're nothing to them. How are we going to beat them? They're giant humans. We're little bugs. But that's not really what they said. They said we were like grasshoppers in our eyes, and so we were in their eyes. And the telling statement is, because they were like grasshoppers in their own eyes, that's how they were seen. Not the other way around. What they were saying is, we look around like, you want me to go fight, Sylvester Stallone, or, you want me to go fight one of these guys? How am I supposed to do that? I'm like a grasshopper. But what they were saying was, we see that we're weak. We're weak people. We don't have the ability to fight someone. We're nobodies. Right? That right there was the first problem. That they actually believed that even with the help of God, they were so weak and so nothing and so unworthy and had such low self-esteem that they saw themselves as grasshoppers. So that's what they became. Because they saw themselves that way, so they became. It's a message to us the same way. That with our own self-image as to who we are, if you think that you are, right, a nobody, then you will be like a nobody. And I don't mean you should be arrogant. You should never be arrogant. But you should know who you are. Right? I can tell you a couple of stories of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who was probably one of the greatest Jewish legal minds of modern times. And I had the privilege to meet him a number of times. and he was really an extraordinary figure. I mean, man was like, he went through the Talmud hundreds and hundreds of times, the entire Talmud, which most people are lucky to do once. And he was a kind, humble man, little man. I went to his apartment in the Lower East Side where he lived, little tiny guy, and he changed the world, who he was. So he said that one time he went to a wedding, and and back then, of course, he didn't have cell phones, and if you wanted to reach somebody at an event, you had to call the payphone, right? You had to figure out what the number of the payphone was. So they would call the payphone. So he had one of the yeshiva guys answers the phone at a wedding, and they say, can I talk to such a person? So he yells out, "Hey, Moshe," to a guy, one of his friends. "It's a phone call for you." So Moshe Feinstein hears it, gets up, and he comes over to the phone. Right? Nobody would call Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Moshe. It's like if you were sitting with the President of the United States, and you say you wouldn't do that. Right? You have dignity. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein was the greatest one of the greatest rabbis, if not the greatest rabbi of his time. Right? And yet, when a guy calls up Moshe Feinstein is so humble. He doesn't think, you're going to call me, that everybody's going to call me like, the great rabbi or something. Okay, he called me, I'm coming. Right? Of course, the kid gets all nervous. Oh, no, I didn't mean you. I would never talk to you that way. Right? But he didn't think anything of it. Then they have another story about him to show you how to understand this, is that a young man went to him to ask him a question, a legal question. And as he's asking the question, Rabbi Feinstein gives him the answer, and he says, "But did you consider this?" And he says, "Yes," and he gives him the answer. He says, "Did you consider this?" He says, "Yes," he gives him the answer. And he says, "Did you consider what's written in this book called the Ksos?" He says, "Son, I got to explain something to you. Do you know who you're talking to? I learned that 250 times. I know it in my head. I'm Moshe Feinstein." That's all he said. Right? So how could the same guy be the same person? The first story, right? He doesn't think twice that some kid is calling him by his first name. He doesn't know him. He's one of the greatest people of our time. And the other one, the difference is that Moshe Feinstein knew who he was. That's in Judaism. The idea of being humble means you know who you are. I know I could be the greatest legal authority of my time. I could be the most righteous person of my time. I can be the smartest person of my time. It doesn't make me better than you. It means that I have a gift, that this I worked on, and I am the best. But it doesn't make me a higher person, a better person, anything. So if somebody calls out my name, and I don't expect everyone to treat me with great deference. They also have something about them that could be great. They work on whatever it is, gift that they have, they also can be great. So in humility, I understand who I am. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein knew he was the greatest legal mind in the Jewish world at the time. For a 20-year-old kid to question his authority, he had to say to the kid, "Listen, I know who I am, and you better know who I am. I am the greatest mind in history right now. I am. That's who I am. But at the same time, it doesn't make me better than you. You can be great at something also. But don't short out what I am." Right? That's humble. A person who's humble is not a person who's smart, who tells people he's stupid. "I'm not so smart." A person who's smart, right, can tell people he's smart. I can't brag about being smart. He can't think he's better because he's smart. He can't look at other people as being stupid. But he should know who he is. That's exactly why in the Torah it says that Moshe was the most humble of all men. That's what it says in the Torah. Who wrote it down? Moshe wrote it down. God told him what to write in the Torah. He tells him, write this down. Moshe is the most humble of all men. How can Moshe write that? If he's the most humble of all men, even if God tells him, how can I write that? I am the most, it's like an oxymoron, right? Like I am the weakest strong person in the world. Right? I am the most humble person in the world. And if you don't know it, too bad for you. Right? That's what it sounds like. But that's not the point. The point was he knew he was the most humble person. But it didn't make him better than you. It made him more humble. Right? Maybe you're smarter. Maybe you're kinder. Maybe you have a better ability at art. Maybe there's something about you that's special. He knew there was definitely something about you that's special. You might not know yet what it is, but he knows there is, and therefore he has to act that we're all equal. It's just that don't diminish who I am, but don't think that I can look down on you. Right? That's what humility is in Judaism. And they said that one time there was a famous story with the Chassam Sofer, who was a rabbi of enormous greatness in his knowledge and how he acted in the 1800s. And there was a woman whose husband disappeared. And she became what's called a naguna, a woman she's attached to a man. She can't get divorced because she doesn't know where he is. Right? He disappeared. Maybe he died. Maybe he's not dead. And people hadn't come forward to testify. If someone would come forward and testify, I know he died, she could get remarried. But he just disappeared. Right? This is not talking about the days of the internet. This is talking about 200 years ago. So all the rabbis started try to find ways to allow this woman to remarry, because it was sort of evident that her husband was dead, but nobody could prove it. Right? So finally it went rabbi, and it went to the Chassam Sofer. And in 10 minutes, he wrote down, the woman can remarry. And on a letter, signed the letter, and they came to him and they said, wait a minute. This has been the biggest controversy of our times. Every rabbi in the world writes arguments one way or the other about this point. And you just sit down and write one line. So he says, I am the final authority of our time. That's my job. I am the authority. All the other rabbis can say what they want. I'm in charge. And he was. The point was, he was an extremely humble person. But that's who he was. Don't make me tell you that I'm not. Don't let me tell you I'm stupid. Don't let me tell you I don't know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. But it doesn't make me better than you. In this area, I know what I'm doing. In your area, you know what you're doing. And it's like, this rabbi is not going to go to a mechanic and tell him, I'm the rabbi, and my car needs this, this, and this. So, of course, he has no idea what his car needs. He's a rabbi. He's not a mechanic. In the area of the mechanic, you let the expert tell you. The mechanic is the expert. You let him tell you. You don't tell him because you're the greatest rabbi. It's got nothing to do with it. Right? That's humility. So that's what it's saying. They were like grasshoppers in their own eyes, so therefore everyone else saw them that way. They saw themselves as insignificant, unworthy, unable to do things. So that's how everybody else saw them. By the way, this was a quote that was a very well-known quote recently. Not recently, but in modern times, with Sharon. Remember Sharon, right? He one time said, when he was talking about how dealing with Palestinians, he said, they are like grasshoppers in our eyes. Now, what he meant was, we're this mighty country, and you have these people going to war with us, a group of people. Like, you imagine if, like, the accountants of New York State decided to go to war against the United States Army. Like, they're like grasshoppers. The United States Army is going to go to war with a bunch of accountants. They don't even know how to shoot a gun. Right? And there's a couple of them. Like, how many are there against the whole army? Right? It's like laughable. So it's the same idea, right? That it's like nobody going to war. So he was trying to say, we're not going to declare war on a bunch of people. They're the grasshoppers. He was quoting the Torah, but the world said he's calling them bugs. He's saying they're not human. That's not what he meant. He was quoting because culturally he was Jewish. He used Jewish metaphors. That was the metaphor he used, and he had a lot of trouble for it. And the whole world, he had to apologize. And in no way did he mean to say that they were bugs. That they're not human. He was trying to say, like, I'm not going to go to war with these people. It's just not right. They're a bunch of people. So that's what he said. So then it says, what did the people do? So it says that these guys came back, they told what they saw. Now the people are despondent. They don't know what to do with themselves. They left Egypt, they went through the desert, now they're going to go to Israel, and what's going to happen? They're going to get killed. We're going to go to war, we're going to get killed, we're not going to make it. Right? That's what they think, because the spies came back and said, you ain't going to make it, the people are going to kill you, they got walls around their cities, they're stronger than us, they'll see us coming, the land itself is dangerous, we're not going to make it. So the people, says, the entire assembly raised up and issued his voice, and the people cried. All the children of Israel murmured against Moshe and Aaron, and the entire assembly said to them, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we died in the wilderness. Why does Hashem bring us to this land to die by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken captive. Is it not better for us to return to Egypt? And then another one says, let us appoint a leader and let's go back to Egypt. That's it. We'd rather be slaves than dead. So now they got a problem. Right? The Jewish people are rebelling. Because these people come back and tell him this. First thing, this tells you the strength of a negative report, right? How you can take somebody and turn them right around. Right? These people are totally despondent. They have absolutely no hope. Right? The Medrash says, metaphorically, that they actually built graves. They laid in the graves, and they said, "Let's just die. Like we're not going to do it. Just like somebody pushed the sand on top of me because I'm not going to make it. We're not going to make it. They're going to get killed in Israel. Better we should die now." That's a metaphor, of course, but that's what they say that they did. They gave up total hope. The Medrash says, just interesting enough, that God said to them, "You are crying tonight," because it says they wept that night. "You are crying tonight for no reason. I will give you a reason to cry on this night." Sounds like my mother. My mother used to say, "What are you crying? What are you crying for? I'll give you a reason to cry." Right? But that's that. What is he saying here? Is that the people, God promised them they're going to go to the land. God promised them they'll be fine. What are you worried about? Like, you listening to them, you're not listening to me. I took you out of Egypt. I told you I would. I did it. I saved you in the Red Sea. I split the sea, killed all the Egyptians. I told you I would. I did it. I told you I'd give you the Torah. I did the 10 plagues. You wanted meat. I got you meat. You wanted water. I got you water. Everything. I took care. I'm suddenly going to forget? I'm going to leave you? After all this? Do you think that? What can I do to convince you? Like, how far do we got to go? That's what God's like frustrated with them. So basically he says that night, the date that this happened was the 9th day of Av. Now we know it as Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. On that night throughout history has been one of the worst 24-hour periods for the Jewish people in history. It started with here. This was the kernel that put the spiritual negativity into the air that every year we revisit. Just like we have positive things in the air that we revisit, this is a negative one. So the first temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. The second temple was destroyed on the 9th of Av. Spanish Inquisition began on the 9th of Av. World War I began on the 9th of Av. The atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki on the 9th of Av. Many, many, many horrible things. The Spanish Inquisition, all these things on the 9th of Av, of the Hebrew month of Av, which we today still keep as a fast day and a sad day. And this is when it happened. Because the Jews gave up hope in God and they cried. God says, "Then this day will be a day you'll remember for crying." This is that day. But I'm still taking you to Israel. I'm not giving up on you. You might be giving up on me, but I'm not giving up on you. So they say they want to go back. So Moshe and Aaron fell on their faces. This expression happens a lot. It means they were totally astounded. Like they felt like they didn't know what to do. They just fell down. The entire congregation, right, were standing there. So Yoshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Yefunah, these are the two spies who were good, right? They tore their garments. It's a sign of mourning, right? And you tear your clothes. Like when a person mourns, they tear their clothes. Mm-hmm. They spoke to the people. The land that we passed through to spy it out, the land is good. If Hashem desires us, He will bring us to the land. He'll give it to us, a land that flows with milk and honey. Do not rebel against God. You shall not fear the people of the land. They are our bread. They're no more than nothing, right? Their protection is departed from them. Hashem is with us. Do not fear them. And what did they do? Everyone started to throw stones at them. Forget it. You two guys, you're going to get us killed. So they throw stones at him. And Hashem, it says, departed. Like, it's His presence, departed. And so Hashem says to Moshe, how long will these people provoke me? How long will they not have faith in me? Despite all the signs I have performed, I'm going to just destroy them. Get rid of all the Jews. And I'll make you a greater, more powerful nation. God now makes an offer to Moshe. You see, God sent us to Egypt, so we should have backbone. We should have strength. We went through slavery to build within us the ability to stand up to anything. And because throughout history we're going to have to do that. The world does not want to be a moral place, and our job is to make it a moral place, and people are going to chase us and kill us and beat us as long as we keep trying to do it. And God's had to put into our spiritual DNA that ability. But here He thinks maybe He overdid it, because these people are so stubborn, meaning the Jews, and so they will not believe in me no matter what. So He says to Moshe, makes an offer. Let's start over. I'll kill them. We'll take you. You'll take your children, and we'll start a new Jewish people, and they'll lead the world to perfection. Just let me get rid of them. Right? That's what God says to Moshe. Moshe says, Then Egypt, from whose midst you brought us out of the land, they'll hear, and they'll say about the people of this land, they've heard that you, God, are in the midst of these people, that you, God, appeared eye to eye, and your cloud stands over them, and you killed them? In other words, Moshe doesn't give up on the Jewish people. He said in last week's parsha already, I'm like the mother to the Jewish people. He says to God, no, you can't kill them. Okay, you want me to be the father of Jewish people? No. I'm taking care of them. And so what does he use as his logic to convince God? He says, you're going to embarrass yourself in the world. People are going to say, the Egyptians beat you. God, you're not so powerful. You took the Jews out of Egypt and the Canaanites stopped you at the border. Yet your own people didn't listen to you. God, you had to go and kill your own people because you didn't have the power to get them to do what you wanted. That's how powerful a God you are. So God takes this and says, in other words, he doesn't change his mind. God is bigger than that. But he's sending us a message. In other words, the Jews have gone so far astray, and every time things aren't perfect, they're complaining. And they want to go back to Egypt. Right? They want to be slaves again. No matter they don't have meat, we want to go back to Egypt. Not enough water, we want to go back to Egypt. Right? So they say, weren't there enough graves in Egypt? You have to bring us to the desert to bury us? It's like Jewish humor already. So basically, Moses said, don't do it, and God listens to him. And he gives a whole paragraph of what people say about God if he kills them. So God says, okay, I've forgiven them because of your words. But as I live, and the glory of Hashem shall fill the world, all the men who have seen my glory and my signs I have performed in Egypt, they're not getting into Israel. This is where they were cursed that they are going to spend 40 years in the desert. If they didn't do this, the next day would have been in Israel. They would have been no 40 years. They would have gone into Israel. But because they did this, God said that any man, this didn't apply to the women because the women did not rebel. Another example of what I said before. Any man who came out of Egypt, who saw the Torah given, who saw the sea split, who still thinks I can't do this, they're not coming. They're going to die in the desert. And in order for that to happen, you're going to be living in the desert for 40 years. The spies went for 40 days, so every day counts as a year. 40 years you're in the desert. When all of those people are dead of natural causes, I'll bring the rest into Israel. So the women went into Israel, and the children went to Israel who had been already there, but the adult men they all died out. So when they got in, of course, you had other men being grown up. It wasn't like there were no men when they went in, but the men who experienced coming out of Egypt, they were not allowed to enter Israel because they couldn't get past their negativity, and he didn't want them to come. So he said that's the curse that they're going to have. And because of it, the rest of the parsha goes on explaining that what's going to happen, that they're not going to go in. And it says here, like on 809, it says, like the number of the days that you spied out the land, 40 days, a day for a year shall you bear your iniquities. 40 years, and you shall comprehend straying from me. I, Hashem, have spoken. If I shall not do this to the entire evil assembly that gathers against me in the wilderness, shall they cease to be, and they shall die. That was the end of the story. And from that point on, it says that they had to wander. Now it says, but as for the men whom Moshe sent to spy, what about them? Right, these 12 guys, right? The people who spread the evil report about the land died in a plague. So out of the 12, the 2 who were positive, which was Yoshua and Kalev, they lived. The other 10 died. Right away in a plague. But Yeshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, the son of Yefuneh, lived among those men who were going to spy out the land. They were alive. And then it goes on. You have the next thing is that there are some people among the Jewish people who said, you know what? God's right. We should have trusted him, and we're going to show him. We're going to go to Israel now. In other words, God tells them, you didn't listen to me, you can't go to Israel for 40 years. So these people say, wait a minute. We're wrong, right? We did it. Okay, we see we're wrong. We're going to show God that we believe in him. We're going to go to Israel now, and they couldn't do that, right? They think, oh, we're so smart. We're going to fix it. No, they can't fix it. So they said, they woke early in the morning and they ascended towards the mountain. We are ready. We shall ascend to where Hashem has told us, for we sinned. Moses says, why do you go against the word of God? It will not succeed. Do not ascend, for God is not with you, and you'll get killed. For the Amalek and the Canaanites are there. The only way we're going to go into Israel and fight the Canaanites and the Amalekites, who were like a militant group of people, is with God. And God's not going to be with you. But they did. They defiantly ascended to the mountain while the ark of Hashem's covenant didn't go. The Amalek and the Canaanites who dwelled in the mountain descended, struck them, and killed them. And so that group who felt, all right, we're going to ignore that God said we can't go. We're going to show God that we're going to do the right thing. No, it was too late, and they were killed. So then you have God then talks to them about sacrifices dealing with the situation, other sacrifices that are coming up. But there's a couple of I want to look at on 8:14 and 8:15, beginning with verse 30. It says, "Ezra b'nei Israel," you have the people who are the natives, right? The regular Jews, the ger agar b'socham, and the strangers, the converts, the strangers. So it says, what about them? It says, let me look about that. The native among the children of Israel, the proselyte who sojourns among them, there shall be a single teaching for them, for one who does it unintentionally. A person who shall act high-handedly, whether native or proselyte, he blasphemes Hashem, that person should be cut off, for he scorned the word of Hashem. This statement has to do with that a person who denies God or who curses in the name of God. The punishment is called kores. Kores means that their soul is cut off from the other Jews. And after they die, you have the Jews, right? We're in the world to come. So the worst possible punishment is that your soul gets separated from everyone else. Now, if that happens, of course, you can always repent. But if the Torah says that a specific individual does something, that's the punishment. That is the most severe punishment. That's the same punishment one gets for eating chametz on Pesach willfully and purposely. In other words, someone who knows better and who purposely denies it. But you have to really know. I don't mean someone who just eats chametz on Pesach. I have a story I tell. It's a true story. I went to the gym, and it was, I think, right after Pesach, and there's this one guy in the gym who's a criminal. Now, he's a Jewish guy. He's in jail, like in and out of jail. He's an enforcer, and he beats up people for the mob. But for whatever reason, he was always very polite to me. I mean, he would go out of his way to be nice to me. Because I could just say hi and move on, right? But he would always go out of his way and talk to me, and was very friendly. And he was Jewish, and he came from Israel, so he had, I guess, a certain amount of respect for my position. So, and I always treated him like anyone else, right? Even though he was like really vulgar, like he didn't know how to speak normally. He spoke really cursing all the time. So one time I see him, and he looked really depressed. I went over and I said, "What's wrong? Like, why do you look like this? Maybe going to jail again? I don't know." So he says, "No, you know what I did? I went out with the guys last night, a couple of days ago, for pizza and beer, and I forgot it was Passover, and I ate the pizza." Right? He didn't think that beer you also can't have, but pizza. Right? He felt bad, right? That he felt bad, and that I was very moved by that. He's a man who his life is criminal, and he beats up people for a living, and yet he was bothered by the fact that he did that because he was raised not to do it. But he clearly didn't understand. Like, he doesn't have a Torah education. He has tradition. His parents taught him you don't eat bread on Passover, right? And he did by mistake, and it really bothered him, right? I'm telling you the story besides the fact that it's interesting, but he would not be punished like that, like I just expressed. A person who's punished like that means someone who really knows what they're doing, like has studied and understands and follows Judaism and says, God, you say I can't eat chametz on Passover, I'm going to stick it in your eye. I'm going to do it. That kind of person is punished like this, not the average person, right, who doesn't know better or doesn't have that type of education or doesn't have a full understanding of God or what it means to do a mitzvah. It doesn't apply to those. Don't misinterpret what I said. The next story tells us a very interesting story, right? which really almost concludes it on 8:17. The children of Israel in the wilderness, they found a man gathering wood on Shabbos, on the Sabbath day. So here, you're not allowed, on Shabbos, you're not allowed to carry things in the public domain without an eruv. An eruv is like a legal wall. Like in Jewish law, you can't carry something outside on Shabbos, but you can carry inside. Like, I can carry a spoon from the kitchen to the dining room, no problem. But I can't carry that spoon from my house to your house, unless you have an eruv. An eruv basically means it's like you built a wall around the city, so everything is inside, so you're allowed to do that. The person who said you can't carry on Shabbos says you can carry in an eruv. So it's not like a thing we made up in order to break the law. It was part of the law. So here this man goes out into the desert on Shabbos and he collects wood. Then maybe he's going to make a fire, whatever, he collects wood. So now he broke Shabbos. This is the first person in history since the Torah was given that broke Shabbos, that he didn't keep it. And he knew better, right? He went through it. It's not like a person who didn't have the education. He knew. So those who found him gathering wood brought him to Moshe and Aaron. Right? They placed him in custody. They had to find out, what do you do? What do you do to a person who breaks Shabbos on purpose? What do you do? What's the law? So Hashem says to Moshe, the man shall be put to death. The entire assembly shall pelt him with stones. The first thing is, the God said he should be put to death. When it says they should pelt him with stones, it doesn't mean you throw stones at him. This is a misunderstanding. The Torah has a form of death called stoning. And what actually happened is you would take a person, and they got the person drunk, dead drunk, and they would then take them and throw them off a cliff, and they would hit the bottom and die. That's stoning. That's not like what you see in the depictions in the Muslim world. They take a person, they bury him halfway in the sand up to their chest, so they can't move, and then everyone throws stones at them until they die. That is what the world thinks is stoning. That's not what the Torah calls stoning. And by the way, the Talmud says that, and Rabbi Akiva says, if I was a member of the court, which he was at his time, nobody would ever be killed. In other words, capital punishment was allowed by the Torah, but it was not something that happened very often. It was extremely rare. It says if you had one person put to death according to Jewish law in 70 years, one person, that was a bloody court. So that's how rare it happened. So you have it in the Torah. So and it says they went out and he was killed. So now, what's the story telling us? So there's a lot of questions about this story. One was that the person did it with the intent that he wanted to break the Torah in order that people should understand what it means to break the Torah. In other words, the man mistakenly or with the wrong idea wanted to do something wrong for a good reason. He wanted to do something to teach people what they shouldn't do. For whatever reason, the Medrash explains that he did this, that he wanted to go, and people should know the severity of breaking Shabbos and what it means and what would happen. So he went and did this. So he had, it's an accepted fact that in his mind he did not think he was doing something that was bad. He thought he was doing something that was wrong, but for a good reason. We have lots of times when we do things that are wrong for a good reason. You ever have someone sick in your car and you speed to get to the hospital? That's doing something wrong for a good reason. You broke the law. It's against the law. A policeman stops you, he can still give you a ticket. Maybe you can fight it in court, but you broke the law. The law doesn't say you can speed if you have a sick woman in your car. It doesn't say that. Right? So here he broke the law, but he said he had a good reason. He did it in order to teach people. So the Talmud says that people did learn from what he did, and he did accomplish his goal, but nevertheless it was still wrong. From this we learn that the means are not justified by the end. Right? That if the end is good, you can't do something bad for good. Right? If I want people to give charity, I can't endorse you stealing money to give charity. You say, oh, you know what? I'm going to do this business deal. I'm going to take advantage of this guy. I'm going to make $10,000, but I'll give $6,000 to charity. So God shouldn't be mad at me. But no, you can't do that. Not only that, they can't take the charity. You're not allowed to accept it. You're not allowed. Right? The means are not justified by the ends. The end, even if your end is good, what you're doing is good. Your purpose that you're doing it is good. You can't do it. You can't do something wrong to do something good. You can't kill someone because you're afraid that they may do something in the future. You just can't do it. You don't have that ability. That's what the lesson that he taught. So that was a good lesson, and people needed to know that lesson. But nevertheless, he was wrong. In fact, it says that if the Jews had kept the Shabbos, this one here, and he was the only one who broke it, it said that they would have gone into Israel immediately. The curse of the spies would have been lifted, and they would have all gone into Israel anyways. So it teaches us a lesson that while what he was trying to do was well-meaning, and what he did was for a good purpose, it was still wrong. And because it was wrong, not only did he pay for it, but we all did. And that's an important point. When one Jew does something wrong, it affects us all. And when we do and when we don't reach out to those Jews, to other Jews, and try to help them become a part of Jewish life and care for them, even help make sure they have enough money to live, even if they aren't observant, it makes no difference. They have money for food. That we don't care for each other, right? It's game over. We have a responsibility to each other. When a person does something wrong, it affects all of us. When a person does something good, it affects all of us. Therefore, we have to look at this as a team. That's why when we did the parsha about the giving of the Torah, it said the Jewish people stood around the mountain like one man with one heart. That is, in other words, that finally there was no fighting, no arguing, no who gets to sit here and sit there, stand here, stand there. They were one person with one heart. They were unified. For whatever reason it is, the number one problem that the Jews have had throughout history is getting along with each other. That has been the problem. And the Torah and our writings and all of Jewish history has told us one thing. When you're finally ready to get along with each other, all of this anti-Semitism and problems that you're facing will go away. If the Jews will finally work together and unify, the world will see it, and all of these things that happen to us will stop. But for whatever reason, it doesn't say if everybody keeps Shabbos, it doesn't say if everybody keeps kosher, it doesn't say if everybody learns Torah. It says, and there are times in history where everyone did learn Torah, and they didn't treat each other correctly, and things did not get better. You have to treat each other well. And it says, there's an example, it says there was one time in history under King David where every child knew all of the laws of the Torah. They knew everything. And yet when they went to war, people still died. It says there was another king who brought idol worship to the Jews. He took the Torah, he threw the Torah out, and all the Jews have to worship idols. And it said when he went to war, no one died. So why? Because under him, it was enforced that everyone had to get along with each other. And the unity of the people is extremely powerful. And if you unify with other Jews, it's extremely powerful. I'm not telling you that you should unite and break the Torah. What I'm saying is that don't think that if you see a religious person who keeps the Torah, but they're rude, right, that's what the Torah wants us to do. The Torah says you have to keep the Torah, and part of keeping the Torah is treating people with dignity, treating people correctly. And we don't do that. I will tell you, it's the number one issue I talk about here and I deal with, and it's not. And I think things are quite good here, and it's maybe because of that. But it is the problem that we've had throughout history, and that's what it's referring to. So the fact that we think that you can not treat people well and you can fight with people, it is the most important problem that we have ever had in history, and we still have it today. It is a cause of the overwhelming majority of our issues in our lives. And if we would ever get our act together and fix that, the entire world will change. And we'll see it. And we try in our small community of a couple hundred families to do this, and to a good extent it happens. People are trying very hard to get along, and people welcome new people and do all kinds of things that people should feel at home and welcome here, regardless of how religious you are, how rich you are, how poor you are, or not religious, none of that. That you're welcome here, therefore, and you see a little bit of the effect. But if it continues, maybe it'll be better here, and then others will catch on. So the Torah here ends very interestingly, and we have to wonder why. Our time is up, but I'll just tell you quickly. It has a story, the mitzvah of tzitzis at the end here. And if you'll notice, it says that when it talks about tzitzis, and the second to last line on A16, it says, you should do the mitzvahs, and it says, lo sasuru acharei levalchem. If you wear tzitzis, right, on our clothes, right? They're a reminder. When you look at them, it'll remind you to do the mitzvahs, so that you should not go after your heart and your mind. That is, go do what you want to do versus what you should do. Right? But it uses the word lo sasaru. You should not go after. It's the same word we started in the parsha for the word spying. It's the same word. And it's the only two times you find this word in the Torah. One at the beginning of the parsha and one at the end of the parsha.